Join me for a walk as I go to the post office to deliver packages that I ship out every day. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the time I was diagnosed with ASD, Asperger's syndrome, about 14 years ago at the age of 32. New here, this channel is all things improvement, whether that be relationships or lack thereof, career, spiritual growth, health, weight loss. I've lost about 110 pounds since doing this channel, and I want to keep going. So I was diagnosed about 14 years ago with ASD, which is on the autism spectrum, and it's also known as Asperger's syndrome, or more affectionately known as an ASPY. Now, I say I was diagnosed, I was self-diagnosed. I've never been medically given that label. You could take good online tests to see how far you are up on the spectrum, and I was like 92% on the spectrum. And then realizing that it answered so many questions that I had in my life and the issues that I had with communication and socializing, and it explained everything. Three major components of Asperger's is difficulty with communication, difficulty with socializing, and being obsessed with one or two subjects for a period of time. And it could explain everything for me. I didn't even know the term Asperger's in 2007. And I was on a forum, and that name came by, and they were talking about a couple of the symptoms. So I started researching, like a little professor, started researching and realizing I had so many symptoms of that. And I studied on it for like 2 or 3 days. And it just clicked when I started going through my timeline of my life. It just clicked, and it explained so much of my life and the difficulty that I've had with socializing and communicating and with jobs and relationships or girlfriends or the lack thereof. It explained everything. I remember being in my living room and it just hitting me. It was like that last scene on The Sixth Sense where Bruce Willis's character realizes that he's a ghost, and he's been a ghost throughout the whole movie. And he's watching his wife, who is grieving for him in bed, looking at their wedding photo, and she drops his wedding ring. And he looks at his hand and he realizes that his wedding ring's not on anymore. And that's when he realized that he was a ghost. Well, it's kind of like the same kind of feeling that I had realizing that I had ASD, Asperger's. I started realizing all these answers, all these things in my life with difficulties with socializing and communication and relationships. And I was looking at flashbacks of different things that were happening in my life and why I couldn't get along or connect with people. It all started to make sense. I know this video is starting out a little bit doom and gloom, but trust me, that's not my perspective on it any longer. And I've not grown to just accept having Asperger's, but I've grown to appreciate it and appreciate the gifts and the specialness of it that comes with it. Living my life with this condition has been like living in a bubble. I can see people, they can see me. I could touch people, they can touch me. I could talk to them, they can talk to me. But there's a disconnect emotionally. For some reason, it's difficult for me to connect with people. And I know that they have problems with disconnecting from me. And one of the well-known psychologists on AS, Tony Attwood, he says, those on the spectrum do need love and attention. They need affection. They need companionship. Those who are neurotypical, those who are not on the spectrum, have this gigantic bucket that needs to be filled daily with attention and affection. And those with us on the spectrum have like a little teacup that needs to be filled, but it doesn't take a lot for us to get overwhelmed. And the stimulus with eye contact and people talking, it can be overwhelming. And so it's difficult for us to fill other people's bucket, those who aren't on the spectrum. And plus, we give off mixed signals. There's been many a times where I've been invited to functions throughout my life, and to be honest with you, I'd just rather be at home looking at my hobby or talking about my hobby. To talk a little bit about the three major components of Asperger's, one is being obsessed with one topic or another. And I remember as a kid in grade school, I was completely fascinated with hamsters. Of course, I own hamsters, and at school I would talk about hamsters nonstop to people. And you gotta know that people were getting a little bit tired of me talking about it. I had a teacher one time that scolded me. Into 5th grade, the first time I mentioned a hamster, the teacher scolded me, and she says, "Don't you be talking about hamsters in here." So basically, the other teacher in 4th grade told her about my obsession with hamsters. And I got addicted to Los Angeles Lakers. Everything was Lakers. And then that evolved to basketball. And then that evolved to something else. Even up to this day, I get obsessed with one topic or another. And I can't help but talk about it to everybody that I know. And if there's a conversation, it's difficult for me not to go into that conversation talking about what they're talking about. I want to talk about my subject or my topic. And logically, I know that that's rude. And sometimes I stop myself and I realize, oh crap, I'm being a clown. And so I do stop myself. The next major symptom of Asperger's or ASD is communication. You have a difficulty communicating with people, even though you don't know you're having difficulty communicating. Something that they say you take wrong, or something you say they take wrong, and not being able to see each other's perspective. And I would have no idea if someone was interested in me, if they wanted to be my friend, if they wanted to be my girlfriend. So sometimes I would say things that now I look back and may be inappropriate. One of the worst days was the day that I graduated high school. And it was the day of the ceremony, and everybody was throwing their hats up in the air and celebrating. And they were all celebrating with each other and hugging each other. And I realized I was off to the side and no one was looking at me, because why should they? I didn't really communicate or couldn't connect with anybody throughout the years that I was in school with them. So how could they? And it was super sad for me to realize that I spent my whole childhood and school not connecting with people. And I remember that night trying to find a party to go through to celebrate the graduation, and there was no one to call because I didn't really have a connection with anybody. I would go by houses that I would thought had the party. No one was there. So that's what I mean by communication. There's a lack of communication, not being able to find a bond with people. That has been a constant thing in my life until up to today. I cannot connect to people in the real world, offline. I have difficulty forming friendships. I have a difficulty filling other people's cup up. I get overwhelmed when there's just too much going on around me. So I can't blame other people. If I were in their shoes, I would react the exact same way to someone on the spectrum. Yes, we have a lot to give. We have a lot to share to other people. You got to remember, human communication is about 95% nonverbal. We don't get the eye contact, the body language, and everything else that's not verbal. Anything that would involve people, whether that be school, the workplace, anything with an organization that had more than one person, I had difficulty in. I had difficulty in socializing and connecting with those people, and they would have problems connecting with me. And that would result in anger on my part of just being confused and not knowing why I couldn't connect to these people or why they didn't want to connect with me. But I was just looking at it from my perspective. I wasn't looking at it from their perspective. If I were in their shoes and I look back at it now with a clear mind, I would have the same issues with me as they did. So if someone was just barging in and wanting to talk about their subject when it wasn't related to the subject that they were talking about, I would get a little bit frustrated. I would get frustrated with the small idiosyncrasies that somebody on the spectrum has. It would confuse me and upset me for someone in the workforce not communicating with me and not telling me when there was a problem and wanting to be a loner and wanting to figure things out on themselves. When in most workforces it takes synergy and teamwork, but I'm not a teammate when it comes to the workforce. I'm a loner. I'm somebody that likes making decisions for myself. I could look back at jobs that I was fired from or I quit, and I'd have animosity towards it. I'd have animosity towards the people that fired me or the people that I couldn't get along with, and I would literally stay awake at nights thinking about these relationships and things that people said to me 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I would harbor on that. That's not a healthy place to be. And being so frustrated and not being able to communicate with the people around me, at the employees around me, I would act out, trying to be funny, trying to connect in some way, whether that be in the workforce, in the classroom. I would be the class clown because I wanted to connect somehow. But if anything, it just further alienated me from people. And I could understand why people would not want to be around somebody like that. But I was confused, and they were confused. So like I said, it's not all doom and gloom with this video and to my perspective on being on the spectrum. You got to realize what your gifts are. And one of our gifts is focusing on the tree instead of the forest. Our gift is not with executive functioning. An executive function is basically able to handle several situations that are randomly changing, and people and stimuli around us that's constantly changing. That takes executive function, and unfortunately we don't have that gift of executive function. So we're not really good at being around people. We're not really good around socializing and bargaining and sales and managing other people. It's just not our forte. But by gosh, we can focus on that tree and maybe not the forest. But with a white heat of focus on one subject or another, you can thrive and excel. And you could do just as well as anybody that's neurotypical. You could do just as well as anybody you could do just as well focusing on your path. Now you can look up online what paths those on the spectrum as far as career-wise should do. You know, engineering for those who are more educated, anything that's kind of repetitive or something that you do over and over again. Long-haul truck drivers make a lot of money and you have to focus on the road for a long period of time. I'm not saying you have to be in manufacturing. I'm not saying you have to be an assembly line worker. There's careers that you can focus on and make a lot of money. In the early 2000s, I started repairing and selling laptops and computer stuff. And I would focus on computers coming in with my own business and sell them and do pretty good. And it was like one of the most happiest times of my life to focus on something I was good at. And it was something I was focused on all the time. The downfall of being obsessed with one thing or another is if you get focused off of something that's not helping you with your career path or giving you a living. So if you focus on trains, for example, and a lot of us on the spectrum love trains, if you focus on something that's not related to a career path or something that's helping other people or making money, it will paralyze you and not make you productive in the real world. And ultimately, it won't make you happy, and you won't be able to connect with people in small little ways. The metaphor I like to give when it comes to socializing and those on the spectrum, if you're a surfer, which I'm not, but I hear surfers talk about getting on the wave and waiting for the right wave and the right time to go on. It's the same thing with socializing. If you see people having a conversation, you just don't get your surfboard and just jump into the ocean without a wave or knowing the exact timing of the wave. So the same thing is with socializing. It's like back and forth reciprocity. You got to know when to join the conversations, and it's not that easy. Just think about the golden rule of how you would like to be treated. You like people hearing you, right? We love to talk, and we love to hear people hear us. So think about what the other person is saying. Don't be ready to jump in with your point or your favorite topic to try to squeeze into that subject line somehow. Just focus on them. Eventually, if they're a good friend and that's the person you want to be around, they'll respect you and they'll listen to you as well. That's when you know you got a good friend. And I realize a lot of us on the spectrum, we don't have a close family or close people around us. Fortunately for me, I have that. I do have a close, small knit of family that's around me and supportive of me and loves me. I don't have a lot of friends, but I do have that. And I realize a lot of us on the spectrum don't even have that. We're loners, you know, we've been discarded from our families, or we've discarded them for whatever reason. But if you have someone, a family member that you suspect that's on the spectrum, just remember what I'm saying in this video. They have love and feelings just like all of us do, and they have the same wants and needs, but sometimes they get overwhelmed when there's too much going on. So just be cognizant of that, because those of us on the spectrum can be very, very loyal. We can be very, very loving in our own way. It doesn't matter what spiritual faith that you have, if you just believe in nature, but believe that you're sent here for a purpose, and you were sent here to give and to love and to be given to and loved. I really do appreciate you watching this video. If you want to watch more, subscribe and smash that like button.